Welcome, everyone. We are live with another episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon, South Carolina Legal Services is leveling up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. I'm Senior Staff Attorney Susan Ingalls, here with our producer, as always, Kenneth Elliott. And we are joined today by Nick May, who is the Assistant Director of the Federal Trade Commission's Southeast Regional Office in Atlanta. We're delighted to have Nick join us today to talk about credit card laundering. And you may wonder, what does the FTC do and what does Nick do as Assistant Director? The FTC Southeast Region brings law enforcement actions to stop unfair, deceptive, and fraudulent business practices. They build state and local partnerships with agencies and stakeholders and educate consumers and businesses about their rights and responsibilities. So we're really excited to have Nick with us today to educate us. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we can't see him on screen, but he's here on audio. So we'll have Nick join us in a moment to give us a little bit more information about himself and what he does at the FTC. But before we get started, we do want to let you know that the information that is being shared today is not legal advice. It's just general information for the public. If you do need the help of a lawyer on this subject or any other one that we handle here at South Carolina Legal Services, you can call our intake line or apply online. And that information is going to be provided at the end of today's presentation. And also, as a reminder, all of our episodes are posted by our producer, Kenneth Elliott, to our Level Up Law playlist on the SC Legal Services YouTube channel. Nick also is willing to answer general questions today if time allows at the conclusion of the presentation. So do put any questions that you have in the question box, and we'll be sure to check that as we go along. Also, just a reminder to check our social media. And while you're there, like, subscribe, and get all the up-to-date information that we provide here on Level Up Law and all of our other resources as well. We'll be giving you those social media handles and information in the conclusion of today's presentation. So let's go ahead and get started with Nick May, Assistant Director of the Southeast Region of the FTC, protecting consumers from credit card laundering. Take it away, Nick.
Thanks so much, Susie. I really appreciate being here, and you did a great job of covering what we do at the FTC. I'm going to say a little bit more about that and about who I am before we kind of launch into the program. So I am the Assistant Director of the Southeast Region of the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission is a consumer protection federal agency. So as Susie mentioned, we bring cases, we bring law enforcement actions to stop fraud. So that could be telemarketers who are making misrepresentations over the phone. It could be online retailers who are making representations. It usually involves some element of deception. That's one of the main legal theories that we pursue at the FTC. In my office in the Southeast region, we cover the southern states, and South Carolina is indeed one of our states. But we do bring actions all over the country. Sometimes they originate in the Southeast. Sometimes the consumers are in the Southeast. It just depends. I am really happy to be here with you today. I'm going to talk to you about a subject that I consider to be sort of an invisible practice, and it's called credit card laundering. And this is it's mostly invisible to consumers, but essentially credit card laundering is a behind-the-scenes way that scammers manipulate and cloak their credit card transactions with consumers. And they do this to stay undetected. Undetected from consumers, so consumers don't know who they're really dealing with, and also undetected from law enforcement and from banks who try to patrol this sort of thing. That probably sounds very abstract and bizarre right now, but we're going to get into the details, and I'll try to make it a little more concrete. And then we'll also take a look at some steps that consumers can take if they believe they're the victim of a scam that involves the use of a credit card. And so I'm ready for the next slide, Susie. And this is just our disclaimer to tell you that the views I express today are my own and not those of the FTC or of any particular commissioner. And then I'm ready for the next one. Okay, so here is what we'll cover today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the credit card system, and sometimes we just call it the payment card system to include debit cards as well. I'm going to also talk a little bit about how scammers use and manipulate the system and how they engage in credit card laundering, the practice I described before. Then we'll look a little bit about what you can do if you think that you've been scammed, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about how we at the FTC can help. And I am ready for the next slide. Okay, so the credit card system is obviously something that all of us use frequently. Until I started doing this type of work, I really didn't understand what happened. I just thought, well, I buy something, I give them a card, and I have to pay for it later. When I got into this work and looked at how it operates from the merchant side, it became very interesting, especially as applied to some of the fraudulent business practices we see. If any of you have owned a small business, you will be very familiar with what I'm about to say. But in short, for starters, if we look at a few terms here, so if you start a business, if you're a small business, let's say you're a coffee shop, you are the merchant, and you will be selling goods or services to customer, let's say coffee. And in order to do that, in order to have consumer be able to accept cards, you will need what's called a merchant account. And a merchant account is just a bank account that you use to accept credit card payment transactions. Now, not everyone can get a merchant account. You will need to be underwritten, and there will be a screening process to make sure that you are a legitimate business and you are who you say you are. This is very similar to when you might walk into a bank, or maybe I guess you used to walk into a bank. You probably wouldn't do that anymore, but and try to start an individual bank account. For a merchant, it's somewhat similar process. You need to establish proof of who you are, what business type you do, and you also make certain, you give the bank certain assurances that you're engaged in legal activity and that you will not rack up a bunch of refunds and what are called chargebacks, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I am ready for the next slide, unless we're already there. So you should be seeing a screen that says Screening Merchants. And as I said, there are sort of a team of people who work for payment processors and banks who are trying to screen out merchants who want to get in the credit card business. That is, the business of accepting your credit cards as a consumer. Okay, so when things go well, if you look at the next slide, consumers will make charges, buy things, and they will get this statement, which you may get on a monthly basis. This is obviously a fictional statement. The amounts are not realistic. And you see, this is how we're probably all very familiar with this. We see the name of the business. What's interesting is that what you're seeing there is actually not. It could be the business name. For example, you see Whole Foods Market. I think that is the name of Whole Foods, the grocery store. But you won't always see a name that is the business name. Why is this? What you're going to see as the billing descriptor is generally the name of the merchant account. Now, if things go well, the merchant account name should be the same as the retailer's name. But things don't always go well, and that's sort of where the FTC gets involved. But before we go there, I just wanted to make sure that everyone sort of understood the basic process by which a business gets a merchant account, and it is screened, and then it's up and running, and these are the charges that consumers will see from legitimate merchants. Okay. And by the way, I will definitely be accepting questions at the end, so I hope you will remember them and feel free to ask me. Thanks. And Susie, I mean, should we pause now for questions, or would it be better to just keep going?
I think just keep going for now. Looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so before we delve, so we've talked about the legitimate use of credit cards and merchant accounts. Great. Before we start talking about the illegitimate use, it would be helpful to explain something called a chargeback. And if we could go to the next slide, the heading should be disputes/chargebacks. Okay, now.
Just a minute. I think I'm missing that one.
Oh, okay. I think that's fine. That may be the older version.
Okay.
That's okay. I'll just talk about them. So people may be familiar with these. You may have heard that if you have a transaction and you believe you're the victim of a scam, or you believe that you didn't get what you were paid for, you can file a dispute with your credit card company. That dispute could lead to something that is called a chargeback, which is essentially a refund of your money. Now, what happens in that situation is the consumer requests to reverse the transaction, and if it's almost like there's a little mini case. So let's take an example. Let's say that you were called by a telemarketer, and they pretend to be a legitimate company. Let's say they pretend to be AT&T. You purchase a service from them. It turns out they're not AT&T. You believe you were defrauded. You call your credit card company, the phone number on the back of your credit card, and you say, I would like to file a dispute. And they say, okay, we're going to credit you back that money right now, and we're going to find out from the company what they say. And then there will be a little bit of a back and forth. It's usually in like a 30 to 60 day period of time, and there will be some resolution. It will be, hey, consumer, you were defrauded. Here's your money back. You get to keep that. Or it's, you know what, the company says that they really were AT&T and we can't do anything. So there's this little process, okay? If the merchant is in fact a scam or a fraud, the consumer will almost certainly get their money back. Now, these chargebacks are tracked by banks and credit card brands, and law enforcement agencies may also acquire this information or look at this information. So if you are a scammy merchant, you are trying to avoid chargebacks. Chargebacks are can be an indication that something is very wrong with the business practices, especially if they are astronomically high. And if chargebacks remain high, they can lead to an account termination. So to put yourself in the head of a fraudster for a second, their goal, if they're accepting your credit cards for payment, is to keep this scam going. They want to keep it going as long as possible. They don't want anyone to figure out who they are, and they need that merchant account to keep operating. As you can imagine, if you do a lot of scammy transactions, you're going to get a lot of chargebacks, and the payment processors and banks and credit card brands may pull the plug on you. Okay, now we are at credit card laundering, and I can explain to you what scammers will engage in to avoid being terminated and to keep their scam going. So now, Susie, hopefully we're looking at a slide that says credit card laundering, or a picture perhaps with a known merchant and then 3 other little merchants.
Yes.
Great. So as you can see here, what merchants will try to do is there are really 2 strategies to avoid getting shut down by banks and by credit card processors. One of which is depicted in this picture, is to use the merchant account of a legitimate merchant. Okay, so they may have some side deal with a legitimate merchant to run its processing through that merchant account. It could be that the legitimate merchant doesn't even know what's happening, or thinks that it's just a legitimate arrangement. But basically, it's against the rules to share merchant accounts. That's the short version. Now, the other thing that scams can do is they may apply for many different merchant accounts using fake identities. This happens a lot. So there could be a scam that is run by one person who has opened up 10 or 20 different merchant accounts in different names. This practice is illegal. It violates federal law. It violates a lot of state laws too. In some states, it's called factoring, and it is becoming more and more common. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you may see this bear out. And I want to say before we go into a kind of a case, a little scenario, there's really two. Obviously, this is an illegal practice, but there's really two negative effects that we should be thinking about. One is that it misdirects law enforcement about who the actual merchant is. If there's a bunch of different fake merchant accounts, there are going to be a bunch of different charges under different billing descriptors and different business names. So it slows down the process for law enforcement of figuring out who is the true scammer. But also it misdirects the consumer. If the business has a merchant account under a different name, you may look at your billing statement and say, well, wait, I never talked to anybody by this name. Who is this? Now, there could be legitimate reasons why the business name is different from the merchant account name, but there are also plenty of illegitimate reasons. So let's take a look. So we should now be on the slide that says how it works.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's just say that if you as a consumer receive a call from a telemarketer and they say, hi, I'm with a company called Insightful Budgeting, and I am going to teach you how to save money in an online seminar. And we have this secret strategy that we have. It's a savings strategy. It's our own technology, our patented technology, and it's saved our clients thousands of dollars. And I can show you testimonials of people who have saved thousands of dollars. Now, the thing is, there is an upfront cost. It costs about $1,300 for the seminar, but we will give you a money-back guarantee if you don't save thousands of dollars. So, okay, let's say the victim here in the situation believes these promises, and let's say if I'm the consumer, I take the online seminar and the strategy, and then I see, there's no strategy here. This is just like basic financial advice, and the budgeting software is really just glorified Microsoft Excel, and I see that these testimonials are actually not real people. This just looks like, it's totally created. And so you believe that you're scammed by this company, by Insightful Budgeting. So you decide to file a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. And so
now we're at the Better Business Bureau slide.
Yeah, and I think I've revised these a little bit, but that's okay. I think we'll get the gist. So if you were to go to the Better, and by the way, this is taken from a real scenario. So if you were to go and look on the Better Business Bureau, let's say that's always a good place to start, right? To see what's out there about a company, and you search for them, and you may see that there are no results for that company. And you're like, how is that possible? Like literally, like nobody's complained about this company, and it's clearly a scam. That doesn't seem right. Okay, and then you may go to your billing descriptor, and you may see, and this should be the one line item in a billing descriptor, should be the slide.
Got it.
Yep. Okay, and you say, oh, okay, so you look at your billing statement and you're like, well, that's interesting. That's not Insightful Budgeting. I don't know what that is. This is some other, As it turns out, that billing descriptor is the guide to what merchant account was used. But at the time, you're thinking, well, I don't know. Maybe that's the name of the business, less costly. Okay, so you search that one. You think maybe you heard something about less costly living or something like that, so you put that in. Well, that's not there either. Okay, so if we go now to the slide that says what happened.
Okay.
Basically, what's happening here is that there are many different names being used for this company. And of course, that's nothing new to anyone that illegal companies may use aliases. But what we're seeing happen now is an increase in the magnitude. So not only might telemarketers be using a different name for each consumer, they also have different merchant accounts. So your transaction is could be to one of 30 different accounts. So it's very difficult to figure out who even scammed you. Now, you won't know who you're transacting with. Consumers don't know the true identity of the company, so it's very hard to report to authorities. And so what happens is the scammers are basically just surviving for a longer period of time. The credit card companies can't figure it out, or it takes them longer, and the same for law enforcement. Okay, So why did they do this? If you look on the next what happened slide, and we sort of have talked about this a little bit, but they're trying to hide their transactions and to keep this chargeback threshold down. They know that if their chargebacks are too high on any one account, they're going to get terminated. And they're even willing to risk a few accounts get terminated, but they know if they open up enough of them, this won't happen, or it'll take longer for the terminations to happen. Now, one thing I would say, this, I'm going to give some general advice at the end, but one wrinkle on this scam we're seeing, and this is part of the general advice I'll give, is that some scammers are actually asking people for personal information to create these shell merchant accounts. So we had a case here in the Southeast region where this scammer actually went out to the public and to various friends and relatives and said, hey, I'm trying to start a business. You could benefit from this business if you just give me a scan of your driver's license, and then you can actually make some back-end profit by being part of this business. Well, the scammer was using those driver's licenses to go open up all these different merchant accounts, which were then used to process transactions for a broader scam. So suddenly, these people were just randomly implicated in a broader scam, and their own identities were used as bank accounts to funnel other transactions that harmed people. Now, thankfully, nothing happened to those people, but they were a different set of victims. So we had two sets of victims in that case. Okay, so, and I'm going to talk at the end about not ever giving out personal information to unsolicited requests, which I'm sure is review for everyone. But if we can go to the what you can do slide. Okay, so now, despite this practice, which is very intricate and elaborate and makes everybody's lives harder, the good news is that initiating a chargeback is still a very effective mechanism to get your money back and to let the banks and the credit card processors know that something is awry. So, as I said, if you believe you're the victim of a scam, one of the first things you can do, if you use your credit card, this presentation just covers, card payment transactions. Contact the company or the bank that issued the credit card or the debit card. You tell them it was a fraudulent charge and ask them to reverse the transaction and give you your money back. Now, typically what will happen after that, they'll send you a follow-up email and you will have an opportunity to describe what happened. And it's a pretty short form, and to explain what happened and to explain in this example, use a telemarketer called me, they offered this service, they guaranteed it would make me save me thousands of dollars. I did not save thousands of dollars, and they did not honor their refund guarantee. And you should not have a problem getting your charge back. Now, that will also communicate to the banks and the credit card companies that this company may be engaged in wrongful conduct. However, we still need to stop this company. So there's one more thing that is incredibly helpful. And if you go to the next slide, what you can do, you'll see. So we ask that you would report an incident like that to the FTC. So our website there we've kind of revamped it to make it much simpler and easier to use. It's called reportfraud.ftc.gov. And if you don't want to do it online, you can call that phone number too. And I can provide those links and that phone number if we want to put that in the YouTube comments. I have another slide here that I don't think you have, Susie, that I'll talk about for a second, and then after that, I am willing to go to questions. I think just to kind of sum up, obviously when a scam happens, that's how we can report it. Those are some good strategies for reporting it, but the best thing is to avoid a scam in the first place. It's not always possible, but we do have about 5 tips that we like to tell people. The first one is to block unwanted calls and texts through your iPhone if you're able to do that. if telemarketers can't, if unwanted telemarketers can't call you, then that solves a lot of the problem. You know, our second piece of advice is we don't give out financial or personal information to an unsolicited request. If you make a request of your bank and then they're following it up by asking you information and you can identify it as your bank, that's one thing. But generally speaking, you know, if it's an unsolicited request, you should not give out any information. Our third tip is to resist the pressure to act immediately. Most scams involve immediate action. So that now I should say there are many scams that have a slower game as well. But if someone is pressuring you to act immediately, that is a warning sign. Our fourth tip is to know how scammers tell you to pay. What that means is that scammers tend to have ways they like to accept payment. Now, credit cards and debit cards are one, but if anyone calls you and is trying to accept payment through a gift card or through cryptocurrency, that is a big warning sign. And the reason is that those are less traceable forms of payment. And then the last thing that we always talk about is stop and talk to someone you trust after you have a call like this. And of course, these sorts of scams prey on all types of people: police officers, lawyers, average consumers. Like everyone can be victims of these scams. So we just encourage you to take care of. That is all I have. If people have questions about this or anything else about the FTC, I can try to answer it. And if I can't answer it, then I can certainly get some information and get it out there through Susie.
Well, thank you so much. I don't see any questions right now, but I do have a question because I know that we see this with our clients sometimes, and that is when a scammer has sort of connected what they're doing to a legitimate company that you recognize the name of. So like, eBay or Craigslist or Amazon or something like that. How does that figure into all of this?
Yeah, that is very challenging. So what you're describing is called an imposter scam, where a bad actor is pretending to be a legitimate company. There are, if you receive an unsolicited communication through email, that is one way where you can look at the email address and expand the email address and make sure you see what it ends in and see if it ends in the company's name in a .com. So one way to immediately know it's a scam is if it doesn't have that. If it has some other alternative .com or .net, or there's a typo in the email address, that's a cue that it's a scam. So that's one way. My personal practice is I just generally don't conduct any business when a company takes the first step. So if there's an unsolicited email or text from either Amazon or a company that seems like Amazon or is pretending to be Amazon, I am not going to transact with that person. I'm going to go get on my computer and go to Amazon.com and operate that way. But it is challenging, I will tell you. I mean, those are some tips, but it's very challenging. They're getting smarter, and you should also. It's not just legitimate companies, but sometimes it's legitimate. It's government agencies too. So it's a challenging issue, and imposter scams are the number one form of scam right now in the Southeast region.
Well, this credit card laundering stuff is so fascinating because I know that many of us, and of course our clients as well, see this kind of thing from time to time, in our own interaction online and stuff. So it's really so important for our viewers to know about how all this works, and so that they can, when they have that suspicion when something like this happens, that they can immediately, having heard all this great information from you, they'll know, yeah, I'm right to be suspicious. This is clearly one of these credit card laundering situations. So I'm staying away from it. So this was really great. I don't see that we have any questions. I think all of our viewers today are probably still sitting there with their mouth open going, wow, I can't believe how this works, you know?
Well,
Um,
that's okay. That's fine. I'll just add one other tip that I should have mentioned. If you have a charge that you think is unlawful and you want to do a chargeback with your credit card company, I should have said this. Definitely look at your credit card and call that phone number that is on your physical card. What sometimes people will do is they say, "Oh, I got an unlawful charge and I have a Capital One card. Let me just Google Capital One."
oh yeah.
And as you probably know, the Google results that come up, the first one might not be the real Capital One, and so then you've possibly reported and given financial information, possibly your credit card number, to someone who's not Capital One. So that's another trick.
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. I recently had a charge on my charge card that I did not recognize, and I kept going back through my mind and through my calendar. What could I have charged that day? And I was almost about to call my bank because I was convinced that it was some kind of a, unauthorized charge. Someone had hacked my debit card or whatever. And then I finally remembered what it was, which was paying for a CLE. So I didn't really recognize but I recognized the amount, and I was like, oh, that's right, I paid for that CLE. Um, so I was able to, but I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, So it's you just have to be very careful and wary of these things. And I think sometimes when you're being so careful, you can even fool yourself. So that's kind of what happened to me.
Yeah.
But I've also been a victim before as well. So for all of our viewers out there, it's really good information that we got for you today. And for our live viewers, and also if you're on the replay, this is really important information. Be sure if anything like this happens to you, or if someone reaches out to you and maybe you don't even succumb to the scam, you may still want to be able to report the information to the FTC, because I know that the more of these things that we report, the more the FTC and other government entities are going to be able to track these people down, law enforcement and so forth. So this was great information,
Absolutely.
Nick. I want to thank you so much for
Of
such a
course.
great presentation. Sorry we had a little trouble with our audio and everything, but I thought it was terrific, and want to thank you so much for being here with us on Level Up Law. And I also want to thank our audience, both live and on the replay on YouTube, for joining us here today, and of course joining us every week on Level Up Law. Now, I want to tell you, if you found this helpful and you know it will be helpful to others, and I'm sure it will, please go to our YouTube channel tomorrow at FC Legal Services and share the broadcast. We want as many people as possible to get this information. It's something that we all kind of maybe know a little bit about, but now we know a lot more about it and how it works, and I think it's important information to share. But while you're there on our YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe for more. Like this video and share it, but subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for those alerts so that little bell icon will alert you every time we post a video from Level Up Law or a video of some other kind that we produce here at South Carolina Legal Services. We have a lot of great resources, and I want to also tell our viewers to be sure to go to ftc.gov, a wealth of resources there that the FTC has. They also have a alert that you can sign up for to get email alerts about different kinds of scams. So, Nick, y'all have a terrific website and so many great resources. So I want to make sure that our viewers know about that.
Great.
So thanks so much. And I want to also tell our viewers to be sure to tune in to Level Up Law next week on Tuesday at noon, when our own attorney Brad Meadows is going to be discussing tax implications for non-traditional income. So if you're getting paid in cash, whatever you want to call it, is it under the table, is it off the books or some other way, and not reporting it on your income tax return, you should definitely register and listen to that episode, which will be another one that is chock full of important information like today's episode was. So just go to our website at sclegal.org and you can click on upcoming events to register. If you just want to do it that way for each Tuesday, we have it there on our website calendar. So y'all be sure to do that. And before we go, I just want to say thanks again, Nick May of the FTC. Y'all doing a great job, and we really appreciate being connected with you here at South Carolina Legal Services. So thanks to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I so appreciate it.
You bet. And thanks again to our audience for tuning in again to Level Up Law. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks, everybody.